It has been a very good 2 weeks for Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, who is kind of having a roller coaster type of season. We've seen him be very, very good for the Dogs at quarterback, and we've obviously seen some really bad decision making from Carson Beck this year. But after these last 2 weeks against Tennessee and, of course, against UMass last weekend, I think it's okay to start asking the question, is the roller coaster season over? Is the worst Carson Beck behind us, right? How can he get better? Are we starting to see the Carson Beck from last year in 2023 where he was consistently good, was very efficient, played winning football, did not turn the ball over? It's been kind of the opposite this year. He's thrown 23 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions. So, it's really been the decision making and him just forcing things and sometimes not trusting the guys around him and the offensive line in front of him. But against Tennessee, right, a game where I said leading up to that game, this could be a legacy game for Carson Beck. You lose to Tennessee, the season's over. His time at quarterback at the University of Georgia is over. I mean, the whole thing is done, right? But he came out, he played great football, threw for 347 yards against the Vols, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's the key, right? And then against last week against UMass, and it doesn't matter. It's UMass. Still, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 297 yards. He also ran for a big touchdown against Tennessee too. So, his game is improving, but, it still has looked bad at times this year. And if you're a Georgia fan, I know it's hard to be like, okay, Carson Beck's good to go now. He's not, he's turned a new leaf. He's turned a new page, whatever the phrase is. And that's the Carson Beck that we're going to see moving forward. I'm not sure we're going to see that because, he still doesn't have Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey. And I still think he's a guy who probably needs a go-to receiver. No one's really emerged. And I'm going to talk about some of the receivers in a second. But the offensive line play really dictates how Carson Beck plays. Against Ole Miss, Carson Beck wasn't really the problem in that game. He got sacked 5 times. The offensive line just could not handle that Ole Miss front seven. He threw for 186, 1 interception, but in that game, that loss wasn't completely on him. But the inconsistency is what's kind of been frustrating. He was really good against Clemson, wasn't great against Kentucky. Nobody was great against Kentucky. Obviously, against Alabama, several interceptions, 3 of them to be in, the fact, right? 3 interceptions. But he also threw for 440 yards, 3 touchdowns, almost led them to one of the biggest comebacks in Georgia or in college football history. Solid against Auburn. Had a couple of mistakes against Mississippi State. But he still threw for 460 yards, 3 touchdowns. Against Texas, that's where we saw him at his worst. 3 interceptions, just threw for 175. Thankfully for him, the defense stepped up in a massive, massive way and led them to victory. But then the next week against Florida, 3 more interceptions. And I remember that's when half the fan base started asking for Gunnar Stockton coming in, right? And I knew that was not the right decision. But I get it. People want to see the backup quarterback when the starter throws 6 interceptions in 2 weeks, right? And you don't know if it's going to get better because it's getting worse and worse. Although I think he played better against Florida than he did against Texas. He still threw for 309 yards, 2 touchdowns. But those 3 interceptions against the Gators kind of overshadows the good that he did in that game. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have elite arm strength or accuracy, but it's above average. And it's good to really good at the college level. It's the decision making that's really put him in a bind. And not being on the same page as his receivers. And that's something we talked about a lot this year because that's inexcusable, right? One of the interceptions against Alabama, he and Arian Smith just weren't on the same page. Sometimes he and Dominic Lovett just aren't on the same page. And a couple of times that's led to the interceptions. Not him trying to force a ball in a window that's not there, right? Some interceptions have come that way, but there have been times where him and his guys just not being on the same page for whatever reason. I don't know whose fault it is every single time, but that has led to some poor play. But the last 2 weeks, things have gotten better, and it's easy to be optimistic. I don't expect Georgia Tech to really challenge Georgia's offense very much. I think this could be a really nice day for Carson Beck, as it should be, right? The day before the SEC championship game where you want to start being at your best. And he's starting to play his best and use his legs too. And I think that's really key because maybe it comes against Georgia Tech. It shouldn't, but it might come against in the SEC championship game where it's a big 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, third, fourth quarter, key moment in the game. No one's there. And he's going to have to make a play with his legs like he did multiple times against Tennessee. And, he's capable of doing that. He's not a burner. He's not outrunning guys, but he's a crafty runner who is more athletic than I think he gets credit for. And, we said that since his days in high school, right? He's not a statue. Kid can move a little bit, and he's showing that. But at the end of the day, his legacy is on the line still. If they go out and lose to Georgia Tech, they could still win the SEC and have a bye and win the national championship, which sounds crazy. But he's going to have that loss to Georgia Tech over his head. Georgia should not lose that game. And I'm going to talk about more of that game later as the week goes on. But I'm not giving Georgia Tech a 0% chance to win. But there's no part of me that thinks Georgia Tech with the freshman quarterbacks coming into Athens at night and beating the Dogs. Just not going to happen. So he has a big opportunity in the SEC championship game against Texas, possible rebound game, or against the Aggies, who just gave up 300-plus yards, right, against Peyton Thorne. Peyton Thorne stinks. Peyton Thorne stinks. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Let's be real. He's not a good player. And he had a great day against that Aggies defense. So if you're Carson Beck, you got to be licking your chops. You got to be really hoping that you see that Texas A&M defense in Atlanta instead of that Texas defense again. But it's still his job to improve and get better. I still think Georgia can win a national championship with Carson Beck, but he's got to take care of the football. And I know that's tough to do if they can't get the run game going and he starts to say, okay, I got to throw the ball 40, almost 50 times a game now. Interceptions are going to happen. Mistakes are going to happen. But if you're a Georgia fan, you're hoping that they can be on the same page now more than ever and just be linked up, just in sync with each other, because that can still improve. His chemistry with Dom Lovett, Arian Smith, Dylan Bell, sometimes it's there and you feel like they've been playing together their whole lives, and then other times it's like, have you just been playing together? I mean, he and Arian Smith have been on the team for 5 years now. Dom Lovett, this is year 2, but still, Dylan Bell, this is year 3 for him. They should have more of a chemistry with Carson Beck right now than they have. And again, sometimes they are, just linked in and they're hitting their spots and they're very cohesive. But it's got to be like that more consistently, especially if they're going to win a national championship. But Carson Beck is starting to play better. And I think it's okay to say, okay, is the worst over? Is the roller coaster come to an end? I don't think so. Because they're going to play really good teams in the playoff. Actually, I don't know if there is a really good team this year. I think it's a down year across college football, but he's been too inconsistent so far this year to say, okay, he's just going to light it up against Tech, light it up in the SEC title game, light it up in the playoffs. That's it. You just can't expect that. You can hope for that, but you can't put that on Carson Beck. Can he do that? Yeah, but he's going to have to play his best, and the offensive line's going to have to do their part too. If the offensive line protects him, he can shred up anyone. I mean, and we saw that last year, and we saw it against Tennessee. We saw in the second half of Alabama. Give this kid some time. Let Arian Smith, give him time to hit that double move on a safety or cornerback and get down the field so they can stretch the ball vertically. Could not do it against Ole Miss at all. It's because he had no time to throw. He did a little bit in a lot of games this season. Obviously, he's thrown for over 3,000 yards. And again, 23 touchdowns. But, he could still play better. I don't know if you can expect that. But, again, he has the ability to. You got to hope if he just limit those turnovers. He's only thrown 1 interception in the last 3 weeks. Again, and 2 of those teams came against top 10 teams at the time, Tennessee and Ole Miss. So 1 interception over the last 3 weeks, that's definitely a positive sign. Got to keep that going. But if he starts to continue to gain more confidence, with this group, with the guys in front of him, with the guys around him, and can play winning, efficient football, this team's going to be really tough to beat. The only way you beat Georgia is if you force turnovers and play excellent defense, although Alabama didn't play excellent defense. Ole Miss did. Yeah, so Georgia lost to Ole Miss and Alabama in different ways, so that's not really true what I just said. So I'm going to wrap this up before I say something dumb again. Anyway, legacy rest of the season for Carson Beck. He's got a chance to do something really special. We'll see. I believe he can, but he's got to play better, got to take care of the football. He's been too up and down in the regular season. Georgia needs him at his best if they're going to win the whole thing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the website.